a young man awoke to a strange and disorienting reality. He found himself looking up at a girl with long dark hair who was peering down at him, her expression a mixture of concern and mild annoyance. She informed him that she had been looking for him, questioning how he could sleep through such an important day. As his vision cleared, he recognized her as Sanjo Rei, a character from a game he knew well. The vividness of his surroundings convinced him that this was no mere dream. Rei continued speaking to him, her tone distant as she pointed out that while their sibling relationship was only a formality, he was being unusually withdrawn. The moment she called him hero, a jolt of realization shot through him, and he scrambled backward in shock, questioning the word siblings. Still reeling from the revelation, he caught his reflection and saw a face that filled him with an immediate sense of dread and hatred. This face, this identity, was one he despised. Overwhelmed by this visceral reaction, he instinctively drew back his fist and struck his own face with all his might. The impact was jarring, and Rei watched in stunned silence as he crumpled to the ground. The sharp, undeniable pain that blossomed from the blow was the final confirmation he needed. This was not a dream. He touched his bleeding nose, the reality of his situation sinking in with a horrifying weight. He had somehow been reincarnated into the body of Sanjo Hiro, who was infamously known as the most hated and nuisance character in a certain popular game. He recalled that in his previous life, he had been an avid player of a Yuri game called Everything for the Score, often shortened to ESCO. It was considered a masterpiece among its fans, set in the prestigious Hojo Magic Academy. The main objective of the game was for the player's character, the protagonist, to find love and happiness with one of the heroines. He remembered spending countless hours engrossed in the game's world. Unlike many Yuri games, ESCO had a heavy focus on simulation elements, which he found particularly engaging. He had dedicated a significant amount of time to customizing weapons and magic, a feature he found odd for a game centered on female romance but appreciated nonetheless. The elements were well integrated into the story, and the way a player's training choices affected the narrative added a layer of freshness and replayability. The four main heroines were all incredibly endearing, and even the side characters were so well developed that he often wished he could romance them too. He had played for days on end, meticulously collecting every CG and scenario, and had even read through the entire art book to immerse himself fully. However, there was one singular aspect of the game that consistently grated on his nerves. That irritating element was the character he had now become, Sanjo Hiro. The hero was an obnoxious boy who constantly inserted himself into the heroine's relationships, effectively getting between the Yuri couples. The character's reputation within the game's world was abysmal, and he was involved in most of the negative story events, receiving far too much screen time for a side character in a Yuri game. His presence was so universally loathed that it was the primary reason for the game's otherwise stellar reputation being slightly marred. After finally achieving 100% completion of the game, the young man had felt a sense of accomplishment and exhaustion. He had decided to head to a nearby convenience store for a snack. It was on that trip that his life had ended. He remembered seeing two girls standing in the path of an oncoming truck. He had frozen in panic for a moment, but his love for Yuri, for seeing girls happy together, compelled him to act. He couldn't just stand by and watch them get hurt, so he had pushed them out of the way, taking the full impact himself. That was the last thing he could remember. Now, judging by his current situation inside a luxurious limousine, he concluded that he must have been reincarnated after his death. He was seated across from Rei and a few other women. Rei addressed him as Hiro-san, her voice cold as she instructed him not to be disrespectful to their guests, dismissing him as little more than a decoration. Her icy stare was exactly as he remembered from the game, confirming that his new persona was already on thin ice. Another woman with glasses chimed in, telling him to keep his mouth shut unless he was eating. He recognized this cold, disdainful treatment as perfectly in character for how the world of ESCO viewed Sanjo Hiro. He thought about his new sister, Sanjo Rei. She was one of the four main heroines of the game, and her story route was one of the most dramatic. It delved deep into the Sanjo family's intense inheritance conflict. In her route, the original hero acted in a particularly conniving and cruel manner, frequently lashing out at her. This behavior ultimately led to a grim conclusion where, in the second half of the game, Rei would assassinate Hiro. He shuddered at the memory, realizing with a chill that this death flag was now very real and potentially active. As the limo pulled up to a grand, modern building, he worried if his fate was already sealed. Inside, during a formal gathering, he watched as Rei bent down to pick up a dropped pocket watch. He noticed her wince slightly, her hand turning red from the awkward motion. A jolt of understanding went through him. She had hurt her hand. He observed her expression, searching for any sign of warmth, but her eyes held not even a hint of affection. This meant that his reincarnation hadn't reset her affection points. She still saw him through the lens of the original hero's terrible actions. He knew he had to be extremely careful and avoid antagonizing her at all costs. Just then, Rei looked over at him, telling him to get a hold of himself. She reminded him that even if his role was symbolic, showing up as a member of the Sanjo family still carried weight. He was momentarily stunned by her kindness and striking beauty, internally remarking that she was perfect. He struggled to maintain the cold persona of hero, worrying that acting out of character would be suspicious. He fumbled for a moment, then, on impulse, he pulled a band-aid from his pocket. He offered it to her, explaining it was a gesture to return the favor for a handkerchief she had once given him. He smoothly added that he'd noticed her hand looked hurt when she picked up the watch and that he didn't want her to go to a dinner party injured. Trying to sound like the suave character he was supposed to be, he remarked that her beautiful hands were meant for the future of their family. One of the other women was aghast that he would offer something so cheap to Rei, but Rei surprisingly accepted it. She said it was rare for him to make such a gesture, almost like a joke, and that she wanted to keep it to commemorate the occasion. Internally, Hiro was relieved and amazed that his gambit had actually worked. Feeling a bit cocky, he then declared that paying taxes and protecting Yuri was the duty of every citizen. The woman with glasses looked at him as if he were insane and suggested he see a doctor, while Rei simply dismissed it as a waste of time and led the way into the main party hall. The hall was a sight to behold. It was exactly as he remembered from the game, a world where it was completely natural for girls to be openly affectionate and date each other. It was a Yuri paradise, a true heaven for him. He also noticed the men in the room were drawn in a half-hearted, generic way, treated as insignificant parts of the background, like pebbles or carbon dioxide. He was no different. People at the party ignored him completely, reinforcing his status as a mere figurehead, the heir in name only. As he sipped his drink, he saw Rei across the room, discreetly hiding the hand with the band-aid. A wave of doubt washed over him. What if his kind gesture had backfired and actually lowered her affection for him? He knew that while he held the title of heir, it was Rei who everyone expected to truly inherit the Sanjo name and power. His thoughts were interrupted when a little girl ran past, and he instinctively warned her to be careful. Then, he was summoned by a formidable old woman seated with her entourage. This was the Sanjo family's great-aunt, the true matriarch pulling all the strings from behind the scenes. She looked at him with sharp, calculating eyes and announced that starting next year, he would be enrolled in Hojo Magic Academy. The declaration caught him completely off guard. It was an enrollment flag he hadn't anticipated. He questioned her decision, but she silenced him with a single word, making it clear he had no right to refuse. He processed the news grimly. Hojo Academy was the main stage for ESCO, and his presence there could only mean trouble. The other family members began to voice their disdain for him, their words dripping with venom. They accused him of begging for money from branch families and using the Sanjo name to threaten people. The great-aunt looked at him with contempt, stating that he was so thoroughly hated that no one would even be surprised if he were killed. The air was thick with bloodlust, and Hiro realized that the original owner of his body was even worse than he had imagined from the game. The great-aunt claimed that sending him to the academy was an opportunity for him to study magic, become independent, and regain some dignity. But Hiro knew better. From his game knowledge, he understood this was a lie. It was nothing more than a convenient excuse for the family to get him out of the way and create the perfect chance to assassinate him. The pieces fell into place. His death flag was not just active, it was being meticulously set up by his own family. Rei's affection for him was at rock bottom, and while she might not be ready to kill him yet, the main and branch families were already planning on it. He had to avoid this fate no matter what. As he pondered his next move, knowing that the game's main heroines were also deeply involved in Hiro's eventual demise, a shadow fell over him. A maid had silently appeared behind him, her arm raised to strike. He reacted just in time, dodging the attack. His first thought was that the family's assassination squad was already making its move. The attacker was a maid he didn't recognize from the game. She must have been a minor mob character. She calmly stated that she was only there to deliver something from his great-aunt. She then presented him with a sheathed short sword. He immediately identified it as the Kuki Masamyun, a powerful magic catalyst device. In ESCO, this was Hiro's unique weapon, and the only way for the protagonist to obtain it was by killing him and taking it from his body. Acquiring it locked the player into the corruption route, which prevented them from romancing the heroines. He realized this was the support the great aunt had mentioned. He knew how good the weapon could be, but the maid seemed confused, as if she thought he'd forgotten the blade itself. He explained that the blade was meant to be formed by magic. He checked the hilt and was relieved to find the activation formula still intact. Eagerly, he prepared to reveal its true form. However, when he tried to activate it, nothing happened. The blade wouldn't emerge. Instead, a holographic status screen appeared before him, displaying the catalyst's properties. To his dismay, it was basically junk. Its stats were pathetic: a weak light orb with minor attributes for transformation and support. Frustrated but resolute, he knew he couldn't rely on this. His first priority had to be reinforcing his own strength. He declared to the surprised maid that he was heading to a dungeon to train. He told the maid she could go home, but she just pouted and called him an idiot before turning to leave. He decided to first head to a convenience store. He stopped the maid and asked why she had insulted him. She retorted that it was payback for the original hero bullying one of her maid friends. Then her demeanor shifted, and she curiously asked if he had a girl he liked, wanting to know about his Yuri tastes. The question, a direct jab at the original hero's reputation for harassing girls, made him cringe. He was once again reminded of how truly awful his predecessor was. He apologized sincerely for what the original hero had done and promised to apologize to the other maid personally. His genuine remorse seemed to catch the maid off guard. She told him it was late but that he could arrange a meeting for the next day. As they walked, they reached a checkpoint for the Tokyo Management Bureau. Thanks to his Sanjo family connections, he was allowed to pass without issue. The maid then formally welcomed him to the dungeon, a strange singularity that had appeared in the world. They entered the abandoned station dungeon, a desolate, crumbling area with an eerie atmosphere. He had managed to get inside, and the maid had followed him. He knew the real challenge was just beginning. He asked her again why she was following him and what her name was, but she deflected, instead questioning why he was in a dungeon. She sarcastically wondered if he was bored with human girls and had moved on to seducing monsters. He explained his plan. He needed to hunt monsters to farm for a better catalyst and gain experience since his kooky Masamune was useless. She pointed out the flaw in his logic. He needed a working catalyst to even harm monsters. She suggested he could buy a basic one with his score, but he grimly told her that wasn't an option. He explained the ESCO system to her, a world where a person's every action contributed to a score that determined their social standing. He then showed her his own score on his device. The history log showed his recent good deeds, giving Ray the band-aid and apologizing to the maid, had earned him a few positive points. However, these were completely wiped out by the mountain of negative points accumulated by the original hero for things like gambling, skipping class, and starting fights. With a score of 0, he couldn't even afford daily necessities, let alone magic conductors. His only option was to buy a cheap, magically enhanced club with cash from a convenience store. The maid admitted she wasn't surprised his score was 0, given his reputation. But she also found his current behavior, his willingness to train and his apology, to be deeply suspicious. The hero she knew was a scumbag who would never bow his head to anyone. She began to wonder if he was really the same person. His first encounter was with a small, armored creature called a Butch Knight. He felt he could handle a single one, but then an entire horde of them spawned, their numbers overwhelming. The maid urgently told him to retreat. Just as they were about to be swarmed, a figure leaped into the midst of the monsters, swiftly dispatching them with graceful movements. The mysterious fighter landed and asked if they were new to dungeons. The hero looked up and his heart sank. It was Lapis Cruet Lalamet, another of the game's 4 main heroines. She was a princess from the Elf Kingdom, so wealthy that the Sanjo family seemed poor in comparison. He was horrified. He wasn't supposed to meet her until he enrolled in the academy. Lapis was notoriously the character most likely to execute Hero on sight for the smallest offense. He remembered a game event where she killed Hero just for eating her ice cream. Lapis initially dismissed him because he was a boy, but then she saw his 0 score and scoffed at his makeshift club. She told him to go home before he got himself killed. Terrified, Hero backed away, shouting at her to stay away from him, convinced she was about to end his new life right there. In his panic, he blurted out that she was an elf dressed like a pervert. Lapis was deeply offended, insisting that her revealing outfit was traditional elven formal wear. He had made a terrible mistake. Lapis then revealed her own score was a staggering 30,000. She said that with such a massive difference, he should be begging her for help. He found the situation surreal, He had always enjoyed Lapis's playful energy when it was directed at the game's protagonist, but having it aimed at him was incredibly awkward. She declared that since words were not getting through to him, she would personally train him. The maid encouraged him to accept. Seeing an opportunity, Hiro proposed a deal, a one-on-one match. If he won, he would take her high-performance catalyst. Lapis laughed, agreeing to the terms. She added that if she won, she would take everything he had, confident that there was no chance he could defeat her. The maid handed him the club, whispering a warning that Lapis was a renowned archer and he should probably give up. But Hiro just smiled. He knew Lapis better than anyone. He had spent an immense amount of time in his previous life grinding and strategizing for the sole purpose of figuring out how to beat her in the game. Lapis, oozing confidence, offered him a handicap. She wouldn't move from her spot, and he could make the first 10 moves. He didn't hesitate for a second and charged straight at her. Lapis thought him reckless for charging without a proper weapon, but Hiro knew her weakness. While her stats were high and her reactions were fast, making a direct assault seem like suicide, he knew something crucial about her character. Lapis would never bring herself to shoot an unarmed opponent. As he closed the distance, he swiped not at her, but at her bow, deftly popping the string and rendering her weapon useless. She was stunned. In that moment of shock, he took out his own kooky Masamune hilt and, in a flash, attached her powerful catalyst to it. He told her that her greatest weakness was her tendency to freeze up when faced with the unexpected. Before she could recover, he lunged forward, the newly activated blade of the kooky Masamune glowing brightly as he held it to her throat. Lapis protested, arguing that his device wasn't even working properly. He coolly explained that he was using her own conductor, which he had snatched when he disarmed her and attached to his defective hilt. The maid chided Lapis for underestimating her enemy. True to their agreement, Hiro began to take her things. However, he saw that Lapis was crying. The maid noted that this was very unlike the proud princess. Moved by her tears, Hiro decided to show mercy. He returned her catalyst and the other items he had won, explaining it was, thanks for the guidance. Flustered and embarrassed, Lapis demanded another match, promising to go all out from the start. The hero, wanting nothing more to do with the stressful situation, flatly refused. He reflected on his victory. While luck had played a part, it was his deep knowledge of ESCO that had secured his win. He had not only managed to activate his own unique weapon but had also successfully avoided triggering a bad relationship route with Lapis. He felt a glimmer of hope. With his game knowledge, he believed he could navigate the treacherous plot, dodge all his death flags, and ultimately achieve his new life's goal, to become an unseen supporter who guides the world so that the heroines can find their happiness and enjoy their Yuri relationships in peace. His triumphant thoughts were cut short as Lapis continued to cry, accusing him of trying to throw the match and demanding he fight her again properly. Overwhelmed, the hero felt like he was going to die from the stress, caught between a weeping elven princess and his silently judging maid. In this world of Yuri he loved so much, he was a man destined to be caught in the middle. Following the chaotic aftermath of his duel, Hiro found himself deeper within the abandoned station dungeon. He continued his training by fighting off small monsters that swarmed the tracks, easily dispatching them with his newly functional kooky Masamune. Each victory brought him small rewards of money and experience, and he felt a growing sense of confidence. He knew he owed his current success to Lapis, as her powerful catalyst was the key to unlocking his weapon's potential. As he collected magic-enhancing items dropped by the defeated creatures, his loyal but perpetually unimpressed maid watched him with a critical eye, noting his surprising boldness. With a new resolve, Hiro declared his intention to use the collected components to truly strengthen himself and ventured further into the dungeon's lowest level. Upon reaching the deepest floor, Hiro confronted the maid about why she continued to follow him, reminding her that he had already apologized for the original hero's past actions. Before she could answer, she suddenly alerted him to something she had spotted nearby. Peeking out from behind a corner was Lapis, who was attempting to hide in a comically obvious way. The elven princess soon abandoned her poor attempt at stealth and leaped out, excitedly pointing at Hiro and calling him by the nickname Zero Score. Hiro was exasperated by her energetic appearance as she immediately challenged him to the rematch she so desperately wanted. He flatly refused, guessing correctly that she was only chasing him to soothe her bruised ego from their last encounter. Lapis then questioned how he, with a score of 0, was even allowed inside the restricted dungeon. Hiro smugly explained that his connections as a member of the Sanjo family granted him special access, allowing him to bypass the usual regulations. Unimpressed, Lapis continued to press for a duel, but Hiro brushed her off, stating that their business was concluded. He even tried to reason with her, pointing out that an elf princess like her shouldn't be seen with a boy in such a dangerous place, especially while wearing her revealing formal wear. Lapis angrily retorted that she cared more about avenging her loss than upholding her reputation. Hiro then casually remarked that in this world, a boy being seen with her would cause as much fuss as an insect flying by, a comment Lapis surprisingly took as permission to ignore social norms. Lapis clarified that while looking down on men was common, she didn't feel that way about him, which Hiro considered a rare honor. Her brief moment of consideration ended as she readied her bow, her pride as a warrior overriding everything else. Resigned to the fact that the battle-crazed elf would not be deterred by words, Hiro reluctantly agreed to her duel, privately deciding to let her land a few hits to satisfy her competitive spirit. Just as Lapis was reflecting on their previous fight, admitting to herself that she didn't enjoy bullying the weak, a massive, heavily armored monster materialized behind her. Reacting instantly to the danger, Hiro shouted a warning and tackled Lapis to the ground, shoving her out of the path of the creature's devastating swing. The ground where she had just been standing shattered from the impact. Lapis, initially thinking it was another one of his tricks, was stunned into silence as another troublesome enemy appeared. Hiro immediately recognized the creature from his game knowledge as an Armorgeist, a rare encounter, monster far more powerful than the dungeon's normal inhabitants. He correctly guessed that its appearance was triggered by the large number of smaller knights Lapis had defeated earlier. Seeing that Lapis was still dazed, Hiro scooped her into his arms, ignoring her weak protests. He had noticed she was too unsteady to stand properly and knew their enemy would not wait for her to recover. He ordered the maid to run for the exit while he prepared for a tactical retreat, knowing the Armorgeist's defense was too high for a direct confrontation. He connected a console to his Kuki Masamune and activated a powerful enhancement magic called Tenebris, which transformed his body and shrouded him in a magical aura. Lapis watched in disbelief, shocked that he could use the same advanced magic as her. Hiro explained that he had created the spell by combining consoles from monster drops and began to run, carrying Lapis as he bolted towards the exit. He knew from the game that monsters were bound to their floor and could not follow them if they escaped. However, their escape was cut short when the Armorgeist hurled its enormous shield, which slammed into the doorway and completely blocked their only way out. Lapis, now on her feet, frantically asked if they could still get away, but Hiro saw no other exit. As his own mana began to dwindle, Lapis, ever the warrior, stubbornly declared that they should proceed with their duel. Seeing an opportunity in her unwavering focus, Hiro goaded her with a new challenge, betting their duel on whether she could defeat the Armorgeist. He taunted the proud princess, questioning how someone with a score of 30,000 could be frightened by a single monster. As he expected, his words ignited her competitive spirit, and she became fiercely determined to win. Hiro then offered to act as her legs, in the fight, creating an opening so she could strike the monster down. When Lapis argued that cooperating would invalidate their duel, Hiro simply stated that a zero-score person like him didn't know the detailed rules, adding sincerely that he didn't want to see her die. Touched by his words, Lapis fell silent for a moment before readying herself for battle, while Hiro prepared to fight, motivated by his personal creed that every heroine was essential for his perfect Yuri world. The battle began with Hiro drawing the Armorgeist's attention, skillfully dodging its attacks based on Lapis's shouted directions. He explained that its armor was impenetrable, and the only way to defeat it was to strike the glowing core hidden within. Lapis managed to land a shot through a gap in its plates, but her attack lacked the power to do significant damage. Realizing a new strategy was needed, Hiro used the last of his enhancement magic to charge the monster directly. With a tremendous effort, he grabbed the creature's arm and tore a large piece of its shoulder armor away, exposing the core completely. He yelled for Lapis to take her shot, and she fired a perfect arrow that struck the core, causing the Armorgeist to explode into nothingness. Overjoyed by their victory, Lapis threw her arms around a surprised Hiro in a celebratory hug, amazed that a zero-score boy could be so incredible. The moment of triumph was short-lived as Hiro collapsed, completely drained of mana. Later, back at the Sanjo estate, the maid, now named Yamada, dryly reported that he had prevented her from having to file a report on his death. Lapis, looking at him with newfound respect, asked if he had truly believed she could win. Hiro, turning away, simply replied that he would always trust a heroine from ESCO. Trying to create distance, he gave the maid the ridiculous fake name, Yamada Taro, which Lapis found highly amusing. His attempt to end their association failed spectacularly as Yamada warned Lapis to stay away from the perverted boy, an act which ironically made the two girls become fast friends. Hiro watched them, his Yuri-loving heart imagining they were using him as an excuse to grow closer, seeing it as a bonus encounter. A few days later, Hiro was jogging as part of his daily training when he ran into a pair of girls. He reflected on his stats, knowing that while his stamina was high, he needed to raise his mana. His attempt to train with magic failed as his score remained at 0 despite defeating a powerful monster. He then noticed a strange number of long-eared elves watching him from a distance. His unease grew when he returned to the mansion to find Lapis waiting for him. She revealed that she had easily discovered his true identity and that the elves he saw were her personal bodyguards, the Alpha. She had used them to gain entry to the estate. Then, to his absolute horror, Lapis announced that starting that day, she would be living with him. She reasoned that since their duel was technically unresolved, they needed to stay together until she could claim a true victory. With a triumphant wink, she declared that he couldn't run from her, leaving Hiro screaming in panic as he realized his life had just become infinitely more complicated, now with a powerful, beautiful, and incredibly persistent elf princess as his new housemate. His predicament was further highlighted by the appearance of another powerful female warrior who menacingly spoke his name, Sanjo Hiro, hinting at even greater challenges to come. The following day, Hiro awoke to the chaotic reality of his new living situation as Lapis and her 12 alpha bodyguards had officially moved into the mansion. Carrying mountains of luggage, they swarmed the property, with Lapis remarking that his home was surprisingly small for a human's. Hiro was internally horrified by this sudden development, feeling trapped in a classic romantic comedy trope. The maid Yamada enlisted him to help carry boxes, while he explained that the large house, which would one day belong to his sister Rei, was far too big for him to live in alone. The scene was pure pandemonium, with one of the energetic elves driving a small cart recklessly through the yard, forcing Hiro to lament that he was the only one who saw this beautiful elf invasion as a complete disaster. Once inside, the Alpha explored the mansion, admiring his collection of famous paintings and anime-style art, noting that his taste was surprisingly good. While searching for a specific bodyguard, Hiro stumbled into the bathroom to find Lapis and another elf casually bathing, creating a deeply awkward moment for him. He learned from the other guards that Lapis was supposed to be under the watchful eye of a dedicated protector. After he finished helping with the luggage, Lapis cornered him to discuss the house rules. She innocently requested to swap rooms with him so she could experience sleeping on his room's traditional tatame mats. Seeing this as the final straw, Hiro used his body enhancement magic and bolted from the mansion at full speed, leaving a bewildered Lapis behind. He ran through the city streets, screaming in frustration at how his life was spiraling into an over-the-top story he desperately wanted to avoid. After calming down on a park bench, Hiro bemoaned how these events were distracting from his true goal of protecting Yuri relationships. His brief moment of peace was shattered by a sudden realization. Their communal dinner that evening would mark his first official meeting with Lapis's formidable teacher, the powerful warrior he had seen at the end of their last encounter. Panicked, he knew he had to make a good first impression and decided his best bet was to use Lapis as a bridge to show they were on friendly terms. He began retracing his jogging route, hoping to intercept the warrior before she found Lapis. As he entered a quiet park, the imposing figure of the elven warrior appeared before him, asking if he was the one who had defeated the princess. Stunned by her sudden appearance, Hiro confirmed his identity as Sanjo Hiro. The warrior, declaring that she would judge him herself, introduced herself as Astemil Kurlicia, the strongest fighter from the elf kingdom of Alfheim and Lapis's personal bodyguard and teacher. Hiro's heart sank as he recognized her from the game. While Astemil was a minor character, she was notoriously known as Sanjo Hiro's ultimate nemesis, and merciless warrior who loathed any man who got near the princess. Just then, Lapis arrived and cheerfully invited Astemil to join their sparring match, much to Hiro's terror. He tried to downplay his previous victory as a fluke, but Astemil, whose cruel efficiency had earned her the fan nickname, Slayer, was not interested in excuses and radiated pure killing intent. Without warning, Astemil lunged forward in a blindingly fast attack. Hiro, activating his Tenebrae magic just in time, barely managed to dodge the strike that would have certainly killed him. Astemil was momentarily impressed that he could avoid her attack, even if he had to use a tree branch to parry it, and declared that she would now use a real sword. Hiro knew he was in grave danger, as game lore established Astemil as a cheat character, with perfectly balanced, superior stats and no exploitable weaknesses. She launched a relentless assault, and Hiro was pushed completely on the defensive, his cheap tricks proving utterly useless against her flawless swordsmanship. When she took an Ayajutsu stance, he knew he was facing her signature move and that a direct confrontation would mean certain death. Realizing he could neither win nor surrender, Hiro decided his only option was to escape without officially losing. His plans were thwarted when Astemil used a warp console to teleport behind him, an ability a close-range fighter like her should not possess. Seeing no way out, he spotted a single opening. She was wielding an ordinary katana, not a magical device. Knowing it couldn't withstand his magic, he created and detonated a powerful ball of light. The blinding flash forced Astemil to recoil, giving him a precious moment. However, she recovered almost instantly, laughing as she admitted he had surprised her into using more strength than intended. She praised his attack but noted that he had only managed to parry a fraction of its true power. Astemil declared that since he had fought with all his might, she would now respond with her true power. With a chilling smile, she began to chant a ceremonial elven song, a tune Hiro recognized from a game event where she summoned her ancestral power. As she prepared her ultimate attack, Hiro, now bleeding and battered, knew he was out of options and could only bet on his one last desperate hope. Astemil summoned her legendary sacred bow, Iriova's Irima, and prepared to fire. At that exact moment, Lapis rushed onto the scene, shouting Astemil's name and demanding to know why she would use such a powerful weapon. With Lapis now present, Hiro revealed his true strategy. He explained that he had never intended to win the fight but was simply stalling for time, correctly betting that Lapis would eventually find them. With the princess as a witness, Astemil could no longer continue their private duel. Conceding her strategic defeat, Astemil laughed, admitting that Hiro had outmaneuvered her even when she used her sacred weapon. Deeply impressed, she acknowledged his incredible talent and said that he might one day even surpass her. Then, to Hiro's complete and utter shock, she reached out her hand and asked him to become her student, sending the story's route into even more chaotic territory. The next morning began at the punishing hour of 4 a.m., with Hiro being woken up by a surprisingly cheerful Astemil, who was ready for their first training session. He was greeted by the sight of his new teacher stretching energetically in a ridiculous tracksuit with the word Shursho printed on the chest. This new, cutesy version of the deadly warrior was a baffling transformation from the intimidating foe he had faced just the day before. Astemil insisted that their teacher-student relationship should be informal, demanding that he call her Shursho instead of using honorifics. Hiro was utterly terrified by the request, picturing himself being sliced in half if he showed any disrespect to the fearsome swordswoman. Despite his fear, Astemil became surprisingly childish and pouty, refusing to respond to him until he called her by her preferred title. Caught between his terror and her bizarre insistence, Hiro found himself internally conflicted, admitting that her petulant behavior was strangely cute, which only frustrated him more. After he finally relented and addressed her as Shursho, she immediately beamed and declared him her beloved student. Their training began at once, and to Hiro's horror, she drew her real sword, the Mumi Bohi, for what she called a warm-up. He frantically protested that he was a complete beginner and couldn't possibly train with a live blade, but she assured him it was perfectly safe since she wouldn't be using any magic. After his continued protests, she reluctantly agreed to use a wooden training sword from Alfheim instead. Their session was a relentless assault, with Astemil attacking him without pause. Hiro was completely overwhelmed, but he knew he was lucky to be facing a wooden sword instead of a real one. He recalled from the game that Astemil was a temporary party member who could level up incredibly fast due to her bug-like stats, but he realized he couldn't expect that kind of easy power from this real-life training. Despite the brutal beating, he soon found himself subconsciously beginning to follow the patterns of her attacks and managed to successfully block one of her strikes. Astemil, however, immediately knocked him down, scolding him for letting his guard down after a single success and reminding him the fight wasn't over. After several grueling hours, Hiro was completely exhausted and on the verge of collapse, while Astemil hadn't even broken a sweat. She explained that her fighting style was based on a principle of trading blows to secure victory, and she assigned him the homework of improving his abysmal stamina. As Hiro collapsed, calling her a gorilla for her inhuman endurance, she simply praised him for lasting so long and announced it was time for a theory lesson. They sat on a park bench as she explained the game's 6 elemental attributes. She suggested he train the light attribute to complement his existing skills, but Hiro vehemently refused, internally believing that a Yuri interfering nuisance like him was unworthy of such a heroic element. When their exhausting training finally ended, Hiro stumbled back to the mansion alone, as Astemil had to leave on an errand. He decided to use the large shower room in the training facility, noting how wasteful the luxurious space was for just one person. His moment of peace was shattered when he was startled by someone else entering the shower. It was Lapis. Their classic awkward encounter was interrupted when a cloaked and masked assassin suddenly crashed in and attacked Hiro, knocking him to the ground. The assassin, a new elf named Mua, immediately went to Lapis's side to protect her. The commotion drew the rest of the alpha bodyguards, who rushed in and immediately drew the wrong conclusion. Seeing the naked princess and the beaten-up Hiro, they assumed he was a pervert who had assaulted her and surrounded him with menacing intent. Just as tensions reached a breaking point, Astemil arrived and took control of the situation. To resolve the conflict, she declared they would hold a formal friendship duel between the House of Alfheim and the House of Sanjo. Hiro was horrified, as he was the only representative for his side against a team of elite elven warriors. To make things fair, Astemil announced that Lapis would fight on Hiro's side. Then, as a final shocking addition to his team, his cold and distant sister, Rei, appeared, her icy glare making it clear she was less than thrilled to be there. Hiro was left staring in utter disbelief at his new, impossibly dysfunctional team. The situation escalated with the unexpected arrival of Hiro's sister, Rei, who was brought along by Astemil after a trip to buy snacks. Hiro was stunned to see her, and Rei was equally shocked to find him living with an entire entourage of elves. She coldly confronted him, revealing she had heard rumors at the main Sanjo estate and came to see for herself if he had truly taken elven concubines. Before Hiro could defend himself, one of the more outspoken alphas stepped forward to defend Lapis's honor, leading to a tense standoff between the elf and Rei. Rei, with the full authority of her family name, put the elf in her place, reminding her that an elf is still just an elf in their world. Hiro tried to intervene, but Rei cut him off, accusing him of being a hypocrite just like the rest of their family. Knowing her personality from the game, Hiro decided to provoke her, inviting her to stay the night to see for herself that nothing inappropriate was happening. His words had the opposite effect, and Rei became enraged, accusing him of trying to seduce her as well. The argument spiraled out of control as she claimed his actions could start a war between the Sanjo family and Alfheim, a sentiment Astemil seemed to agree with. The explosive tension was comically defused when Astemil nonchalantly started a debate about having curry for dinner, treating the potential international incident as a trivial matter. Astemil then officially laid out the rules for their friendship duel. The match would be a single round with the outnumbered Sanjo side being allowed 2 fighters, Lapis and a sibling, against a single elf from Alfheim. If Alfheim won, they would get to choose the dinner menu, while if the Sanjo team won, the misunderstanding in the shower would be forgiven, and the alpha would cease their hostility towards Hiro. Disgusted by the childish nature of the duel, Rei turned to leave. However, a spirited elf named Si challenged her directly, calling her a coward for running away. Provoked, Rei accepted the challenge, and the duel began between her and Si. As the two faced off, Hiro tried to slip away, but Lapis asked him to stay and watch over her. The duel started with a fierce exchange of blows, with Rei's refined swordsmanship clashing against Shi's aggressive style. Rei quickly gained the upper hand and disarmed her opponent with a swift, precise strike. Before the match could be declared over, another elf named Me tagged in to take Shi's place. Lapis shouted advice to Rei, who took a moment to assess the situation, realizing the alpha were not to be underestimated. During the pause, Hiro explained to Lapis that while Rei and Shi were evenly matched, their side had a slight advantage since the alpha were forbidden from using their signature bows. The fight resumed, now with Rei facing 2 elves. An elf named Pyong, who was supposed to be Rei's partner, made a surprising move, tackling the opposing elf and taking them both out of the fight in a sacrificial tumble. This left Rei in a one-on-one match against the final elf warrior. The remaining elf was momentarily distracted by the chaos at her feet, and Rei, seeing her chance, lunged forward. With a single, decisive blow, she knocked the weapon from her opponent's hand, securing a clean victory for the Sanjo team. The intense duel between Rei and the elf warrior Ai ended in a draw, as both landed a strike at the exact same moment. Astemil declared that Shi had earned a point, and the two opponents, their adrenaline still pumping, shared a moment of mutual respect. Rei admitted it had been a long time since she had felt so fired up, and Ai apologized for her earlier rudeness, thanking Rei for the exciting match. As Lapis tended to Rei's hand, Hiro noticed the bond forming between them and became comically excited, seeing the perfect flag for a new Yuri pairing. He eagerly tried to convince Rei to stay for a sleepover to get closer to Vistai, but Rei flatly refused, ending his fantasy. After the duel, Hiro approached the silent assassin Mua, wanting to make peace and thank her for her role in the earlier dungeon battle. Before their conversation could begin, Lapis, feeling competitive, declared she also wanted to fight Mua. Seizing the opportunity, Astemil announced a second round, Mua versus the team of Hiro and Lapis. Lapis was initially annoyed at being paired with Hiro again, but he promised not to treat her like a shield this time, and the two prepared for battle. The duel began with Hiro and Lapis fighting in perfect sync against the highly skilled assassin. Mua was taken aback by their fluid teamwork, as they effortlessly covered each other's blind spots and moved with a grace that resembled a dance. Their coordinated assault pressed Mua, whose loyalty to Lapis prevented her from attacking recklessly. Seeing an opening, Lapis signaled to Hiro, and he lunged forward. However, at the last second, he feigned a slip and fell, allowing Mua to land a clean hit and win the match. Lapis was furious at his apparent clumsiness, but Hiro's plan had worked, preserving Mua's pride without revealing his true strength. Later that evening, the group gathered for a celebratory dinner of Japanese curry, which Hiro had prepared. The meal was a resounding success, and even the maids who had once despised him were now warming up to him thanks to his recent apology and efforts. After dinner, Hiro found Lapis and tried to talk to her about the overprotective Alpha, particularly Mua. Lapis explained that her bodyguards were just worried about her and meant no harm. As Hiro tried to gently suggest that her presence was causing trouble, Lapis misinterpreted his words as him wanting her to leave. Her face fell as she confessed that she had no friends outside of Alfheim and that his kindness had touched her. Seeing her on the verge of tears, Hiro panicked and immediately backtracked, terrified of making a heroine cry. His frantic reversal was overheard by the ever-present Alpha, who swarmed him with their weapons drawn, believing he was upsetting their princess. He quickly assured a tearful Lapis that she could stay as long as she wanted, resigning himself to the chaos. Troubled by the day's events, Hiro later saw Rei walking alone down a corridor and decided to follow her. He found her in the mansion's observatory, looking out at the night sky. She confronted him, revealing she knew he had intentionally lost the duel against Mua. She questioned his motives, and Hiro admitted that he saw Mua's devotion to Lapis and couldn't bring himself to defeat someone with such strong loyalty. Rei fell silent, and then began to open up about her own dark past. She spoke of a lonely childhood trapped within the manipulative Sanjo family, where she was used as a political tool and never shown genuine affection. She recounted how the original Hiro had been just another tormentor, exploiting her for his own gain. Her heartbreaking story revealed a girl who had built walls around her heart as a defense mechanism, unable to trust anyone. Overwhelmed by years of pain and betrayal, she lashed out at Hiro, screaming that it was too late for him to pretend to be a good person now. She tearfully ran from the room, leaving Hiro shaken. He realized that in the original game, Rei was meant to be saved by the protagonist, and his presence threatened to ruin her chance at happiness. As he stood there, lost in thought, the maid Snow appeared behind him, her expression unreadable as she told him she had a request.